when this business is successful, then I will be able to have the family and the life and the lifestyle that I desire. And I kept those two things mutually exclusive. And it wasn't until I really had to face a lot of my personal challenges that arose through this experience that I realized I was creating that chasm myself. I was voluntarily putting these two things so far apart that it was causing conflict in both worlds.
I'm Chris Ronzio. Welcome to Organized Chaos. Hey everyone, I'm Chris Ronzio, founder and CEO of Trainual, and welcome back for another episode. This one's a little bit different. We're interviewing one of my best friends, Russ Perry, who is the founder and CEO of Design Pickle. They've got close to 500 team members in 6 different countries around the world, and while Russ genuinely loves pickles, he says that he'll get along with anybody regardless of their affinity for cucumbers. So, weirdest intro I've ever read, but what I loved about this conversation is that Russ, who runs this huge company, flat rate creative design services, he's built this over the last 5 years, but what he's really been building this whole time is a foundation at home. He's been investing in himself. He's been creating the family, the lifestyle that he wants, and his business has succeeded around that and because of it, I believe. And so what Russ dives into is everything from his story and journey into creating Design Pickle, to the filter of how he made his decision to create this business, to how he does annual and quarterly planning and keeps his life just integrated, personal and business life, on a day-to-day basis. He's an amazing friend. He's been an inspiration for me, and you're going to learn a lot from this. So enjoy. Welcome back, everyone. I'm your host, Chris Ronzio, and as you heard in the intro, today we have a very special guest, and this podcast interview is going to be a little different than our normal interviews because Russ Perry has literally been my best friend for like 10 or 11 years now. So what's up, Russ?
Excellent. Are we going to talk about not business or are we going to talk about business?
We're going to talk about both. I mean, I think the main topic should be not business, though. So just some context, I feel like the question I get asked so often when people follow me on Instagram or see presentations, and I talk about the family stuff so much, and they're like, is that a facade or do you really have that kind of balance? And it's something that I can't articulate as well as you because I learned a lot of from you. So I want to dig into this idea of like how you merge together growing a massive company, which we're going to talk about in a second, with having just like an incredible family, an incredible look on your personal fitness, and just how do you balance it all? So that's what we're going to get into.
Excellent. Well, I mean, I think it's appropriate to start on all the mistakes that I made because you've known me long enough to know that like it wasn't always that way. And I think I have journeyed through ups and downs, and depending on how deep you want to go. But I want to share that, the results of today were because of not doing this very well for the first half of my career, almost nine years of keeping things very separate. There was work life, there was personal life, there was compromises in both areas, and often me putting work at the expense of my personal life, which didn't work out so well.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's get into that. So
Great.
Before we do, why don't you give some context? What does Design Pickle look like today?
So where I'm sitting today, Design Pickle, we are a global creative services company. We have approximately excuse me, I'm getting emotional. We have approximately 500 team members. A lot of those team members are international. We have a huge international group that focuses on our creative services, which is graphic design, custom illustration, future services later this year. And what we essentially do is we match a business, an entrepreneur, a marketer, a salesperson, wherever roles they are, with the perfect creative for their needs. So that could be as simple as, hey, I need online ads on a regular basis. I need to shift my messaging. COVID was a huge boost for us. A lot of people changing all of their collateral and content And our model is designed to be the best of both worlds between a W-2 employee in the sense that you can create a relationship with your creative, but also super flexible. So month to month, flat rate, you're never going to get billed hourly or per project. And yeah, we have almost 4,000 clients around the globe, and it's actually 24/5, 24 hours a day, 5 days a week. There's creative happening on the Design Pickle platform.
Okay, so 500 employees, 500 team members is it like 10 countries now?
6 countries. We were in 7. We had to put a pause on one,
Okay.
unfortunately, for some global infrastructure issues.
Okay, so 6 countries, and it's only been like 5 years?
5 years, yeah. January 2021 will be our 6-year anniversary.
Okay, so for anyone listening to this, it's probably unfathomable to build a company with 500 people across 6 countries in only 5 years. And so I want to go back to the days before Design Pickle, when you didn't have a global team and you didn't have a really cool brand, and you were kind of like the rest of us with just a little startup in a garage, right? And
Yeah.
that's sort of where you and I met. We had both gotten married, I think, within 6 months of each other. And we were trying to learn how to be entrepreneurs that also needed to have a family life. So what were those early years like for you?
Well, like you said, we were young. I never took business. I went to a public school, a public university, unlike the host here today. And the point is business was, and I still don't think business is accurately reflected in school anyway. It was, I want to have a business and I have a skill set, but I have no clue at all how to do that. And my business at the time when we met was a creative agency. So really the only thing I was good at was sales. That was it. The rest of my business was miserable. I wasn't good at delivery. I wasn't good at retained client services. I wasn't good at, even the creativity was hit or miss, although we ended up having a really great creative team towards the end of it. And today we talk about churn, we talk about retention. I mean, I had like a 90% churn rate with my clients. So every time I was going out, it was always to get new business. And I just thought that was normal. Like, I just thought that that's how it was. And long hours, lots of travel, lots of stories in my mind that when this business is successful, then I will be able to have the family and the life and the lifestyle that I desire. And I kept those two things mutually exclusive. And it wasn't until I really had to face a lot of my personal challenges that arose through this experience that I realized I was creating that chasm myself. I was voluntarily putting these two things so far apart that it was causing conflict in both worlds. My marriage was struggling. I was stressed. I used to struggle with alcohol. I was drinking. My business was in no better shape. And I had this epiphany. It was like, this is not how it should be. Like, this is gonna tear people apart. And we both have seen, probably people listening to this experience, that it truly can when you keep them in such isolated buckets.
Yeah. And so when your company is really stressing you out and you feel like you're on this hamster wheel, I mean, I remember the same thing. Like, I would sell a big contract and you get that rush of, the deposit hitting the bank account or something. And then you're like, I've got to actually do work now. Like, I gotta fulfill this. And that's where all the problems happen. And so as you were going through that with your agency at the time, like, you had iterations of it, or like what finally made you decide that you couldn't do that business anymore? How did you reach that brink?
Right. There were 2 distinct chapters of my agency, and the second chapter was actually developed a little bit of a skill set that I then later used for Design Pickle. The first chapter was me on my own here in Tempe, Arizona, and we were a branding and creative agency. And I kind of went through I say business awakening during that time, really driven by my decision to get sober. And the second chapter was at the tail end of my career as an agency owner, where I had forged a partnership with an amazing husband and wife in Argentina, learning how to do design remotely, and we managed the accounts. And that very first year I quit drinking was like the last year of my agency life. And that was when I finally had the self-awareness, because I was able to kind of get beyond the stress in a healthy way, where prior I was going to really unhealthy, destructive habits to manage it. And I was sort of able, like, almost view it like I kind of rose above it into the clouds, and I could see the stress, and I wasn't distracting myself from the stress. And I just was like, this is a terrible business model. Like, I don't want to be in this at all. And it was a personal life decision to say, you know what? I don't know what's next. There was no design pickle. There was no recurring revenue model. There was none of the ideas that I currently have today were in play. But I knew this type of business and this type of lifestyle, I needed to end it.
Yeah.
And that's what it did. I didn't sell my business. We could have continued on. The analogy I always use was like putting a dog to sleep that you love. Like, it was a compassionate shutdown to have the space and the openness to see what was next. And I remember, I don't know if you know this, Chris, I probably have told you, but we did so much print work, and we always collect samples and things. Mm-hmm. And I remember the last days of the agency taking the drawers of all the work from almost the last 9 years and throwing it into the dumpster. And I'm like crying, because it was just like, wow, this is no longer me. I don't really know where I'm going, but I was committed to finding out the answer. And I was committed to saying, you know what, there's got to be a better solution for who I am as a creative entrepreneur, and the way that I could create value in this world, as well as value for my family, income, and so on.
Yeah. Okay. So during that time, I guess for anyone, again, that's listening, that's heard me and Russ in the past, I was renting a desk from you in your agency and running my little solo consulting operation at the time. And I remember you going through this change, but what was really inspiring coming out of the other side of that was that you really reoriented your perspective on where business and personal life intersect. So talk us through how you laid out the blueprint for this next chapter, because I think that's something that a lot of people wish they could do, is just scrap everything and start over. So how did you do it?
Well, first, I did not have the skill set to just do it on my own. And I thought really practically about this. And I thought, you know what, if I was going to go learn a new physical skill, let's say swimming, or let's say rock climbing, the best way to do that is to go hire a coach and learn from an expert. And so I invested in, around that time, 3 different personal development / coach people. One was a one-on-one coaching relationship. One was more of an ongoing coaching relationship. And the third was a conference that I went to. And between all of that, like, I wasn't too selective. I just kind of was like, whatever. I remember the conference as an entrepreneur here. Her name is Vanessa Shaw. I didn't realize it was actually kind of more like a women's conference. And I showed up, and it's like me, and the only other man there was her husband, who's a really cool guy, Robert. But like, I was like rolled with it, I was like, cool, like, I'm here to learn. And so I recognized that for me to solve this problem, I couldn't do it with my current skill sets. And we know that intrinsically in business, but sometimes we don't realize it's the same thing for personal stuff. Whether it's relationships with a partner or kids or whatever, there are people out there doing it better than you are. Go learn from them. Go read a book. And in that process, I came to this really simple technique, which was, and I even used it this weekend. It's you can use it on a big scale. You can use it on a small scale. It's get clear on what you want first before trying to come up with the plan to get there. So for me, at this point in my life, I didn't know what my professional path was going to be. But I knew what my skill sets were. I knew what my passions were. I knew there were some like tangible things that I wanted, like a nicer car, these like not super meaningful things, but things that I could say, yeah, I would like a nicer car than what I currently have. And so I sat down at a coffee shop, Press Coffee here in Scottsdale, Arizona, and I just made this list of what I wanted. And it was like, in the next 3 years, that was the timeline. Like, in the next 3 years, here is what I want. Some were tangible goods. Others were relationship. Like, I wanted to have another child. It wasn't clear at the time with my wife, ended up being a daughter, our youngest. And so I put that down, like, I want another daughter, or I want another child. And I want a nicer car. I'd like to own a house. I want to be in creativity. I still want to be a creative professional. And then that list became my compass. It was that list that I could then start evaluating decisions and saying yes or no quicker, because I could say, look, this decision's going to get me closer to these things or it's not. And it was really nice. And a practical example was a business opportunity I had with another guy to do like a HubSpot agency. And in my list was, I want to travel and I want a remote team where I don't have to necessarily be tied to a desk. Well, this HubSpot agency was very much visiting clients, traveling, presenting, pitching in person. And while it was a cool opportunity, and it did not fit for this list.
Yeah.
And so 6 months went by until the Design Pickle pieces started to come together. And that was truly, no joke. I mean, I just got goosebumps talking about it. The aha moment for me was when the idea of Design Pickle didn't have the amazing brand name yet, came to about. It's like subscription graphic design. Let me check my list. And boom, 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 boom. Everything except for maybe like one little thing, which I was like, it's close enough. It matched. It passed. And that was the motivation as well as the confidence for me to now focus on this idea. And what it did, to kind of come back to it, it ensured my personal priorities were the foundation of my professional concept and idea and venture. Because really that list, it was a personal list. It wasn't a professional accomplishments kind of things that I want to do.
Yeah.
And then that was the domino that kicked off pretty much the last 5.5 years.
So before we go into Design Pickle, being able to make that list really relied on you taking an honest look at your current reality, right? You had to be real with yourself, that snapshot. And so was there some tool or some, was it through the coaching? Like how could people do that right now? What would you instruct someone to do to take that snapshot?
So the content of this process was actually lifted by one of my coaches, and he gave him credit, by Ray Dalio. He just published a book last year called Principles, and he had an earlier essay on these principles, but it literally is this process. I'll teach everyone right now how to do it. In the next 3 years, what would you like to accomplish to be satisfied with your life? Put it down. And the caveats here is don't get into the weeds of the specifics. So again, personal, professional, family relationships, travel, whatever it is you want. And the term satisfied is super important because we're not seeking perfection and the most exciting things. It's just that, post-Thanksgiving dinner kind of vibe, like satisfied.
Yeah.
And that's the list. That was the list. 6 to 7 things. You want enough on there. You want to not. You don't want 50 things. And you imagine this thing just sits in your back pocket. And then what you do is you use this inside of your decision making. When an opportunity comes knocking at the door, you can take it out either mentally or actually and say, like, look, does this match? Or when you're brainstorming your business, your plans, your next thing, you can say, well, will this still allow me to keep on the path for this list? And so the Ray Dalio has a much more complex version of this, but you can go into it and check it out. It's built on his values, but that was it. And it's like radically simple, but I think that's why it works. And I have now done this in so many different ways. In what vacation do we want to go on? Let me make a list. I'm not going to pick a place. Let me just make a list. We want a beach. We want to rent a house. We want to do these things. What kind of client should we go after for a new product? Well, we want clients who have this, this, and this, and this. Okay, now we can understand what kind of product it is that we need to serve. So the process works both professionally and personally. I mean, I have so many notes on
Yeah.
my iPhone with these lists.
I know. I remember making a version of the list, like on one of your whiteboards, how we wanted to be able to buy our wives nice purses or something like that. Do you remember that?
Totally like meaningful things.
Yeah,
Yeah.
really, really big
We're
picture. No,
still
but
working on it.
we got better at it. But something we have done every year together, which I think would be useful for everyone, is we get together for this like vision day of what do we want out of the next year. And we're making both personal and professional kind of goals for the year, right? So maybe you share that process.
Yeah. And so there's a lot of personal development models out there that talk about, your whole life, whether it's the wheel of life or, 12 categories of this. One that you and I have done is one based off of a program called Warrior. And it's 4 quadrants: body, being, balance, and business. And what we end up doing is we look at, bodies, our mental, our physical health, our wellness, our sleep, our diet. Being is more of our mental health and or spirituality. Balance is our immediate important relationship. So that can be a partner, that can be kids, close family and friends, and then business is business. Typically in an annual planning process, people just look at the 4th quadrant: business. What have we done? Where do we want to go? And you and I, we sit down and we say, first we reflect, which is super important. And it's mind blowing. And our process is, you'll be on the board writing for me, and I'll list off all the stuff we've done, and then we'll flip flop. So that way you can just brainstorm and brain dump. And then when you take a step back on the reflection part, for now 3 or 4 years, we're like, holy crap, like
Crazy.
Look at what was been done. This is amazing.
It's
and
crazy.
then we set out to say, what do we want in the upcoming year in these 4 quadrants? And I'll add that it's important to realize you can only grow as far in your life as the lowest performing quadrant. So if you're suffering incredible challenges with health, it doesn't matter what your game plan is for your business. You will be pulled down and be in the weeds of the health issues. Yeah. Similarly, if you have crazy business challenges that aren't being addressed or resolved, it's going to affect your relationships. It's going to affect your mental health. And so by being proactive about the focus on those other areas, you're also ensuring that those areas aren't going to fall by the wayside, and they're going to continue to grow, which is that, rising tide raises all ships analogy. Yeah. It's same concept in your own life.
Yeah, so these big targets that we set are kind of aspirational. It feels daunting a lot of the times when we do.
It should be scary.
Yeah, it is scary. But the piece to connect to that is like, how do you on a daily basis make sure that you're making strides toward those big goals? When people talk about work-life balance, a lot of times it's down to the instantaneous moments where you're deciding whether you're going to stay late at work and miss dinner, or it's those kind of things. So how do you maintain that sense of balance, I guess, on a day-to-day basis?
Well, I'm a very visual guy, as you can imagine, running a creative company. And so I have 2 whiteboards that I'm seeing all the time. The first is when I drive my car and I park my car, there's a whiteboard right by my car, like when I get out. So I ensure that I have enough, not so much stuff where I can't park in my garage. So that's a prerequisite. You have to be able to park in your garage or somewhere where you can hang a whiteboard.
Or
and
if you don't have a professional organizer, right?
Yeah. Or if you don't have a whiteboard, put it in your bathroom, put it in your entryway, that part of the room where no one really sees or whatever. And I have my 90-day version of the year-long outcomes. So we set down our year-long plan. And then the key is to say, okay, well, in the next 3 months, what it is that I want to do. And that coordinates really nice with business planning, because most business planning follows the same process. Yeah. But I'll do that in the other 3 personal areas. So I'm visually seeing that every day at home. And then I have a more expanded version of just business at the office with everything else.
Yeah.
So that's number 1, is you have to make it visible. If it just sits inside a Trainual where you're not seeing it all the time, actually we should see it inside a Trainual, but if it sits in a book, it sits on a note on your phone or whatever, you will forget. And it's, all the great intentions. So put it somewhere.
Yeah.
The next is then that quarterly review. And I think that's the important part too, is we don't just meet in January and say, peace out. Every 90 days, I am looking back and having a mini version of what has been accomplished and where do I want to go in the next 90 days and how do I course correct? And that cadence and the discipline to do that is surprisingly challenging with how busy we all are. So I will every 90 days block out one full day, 90 days out for this review. And I always am making sure I have one day protected it's usually more like every 90 to 120 days that I'll do that one day by myself. So same idea, just repeating it with smaller time increments and ensuring that there's actual visibility of where it is you want to be.
Yeah. And so how do you make sure that you're on track? Like if you have great annual goals, you've got great quarterly targets that you set, you're seeing your whiteboards. I think it comes back to that filter that you created, right? To make sure that your life day to day is maintaining that balance of keeping all the relationships with your family in good standing, keeping your relationship with yourself in good standing, with your mind, with your fitness, right?
Yeah, and it's not easy. My filter list from 2014 is completely outdated today. So you're balancing the near-term things and challenges and aspirations of what you want with the longer-term vision of who you want to become. And that's really the two differences. The 90-day and the year-long plan are, here's what I want to do. And the list, if you will, is here's who I want to be. And here's the things that I want to become. So as things are accomplished, thankfully I was able to get a new car. Like that's now not on my list. And a car won't be on my list because I love my car. I'll pay it off in a year or so. And like, that's going to be my car. So I now have other things, which is more like next year, my oldest daughter turns 16 and I want to take her to New York City. She's never been. I want to have a really cool experience there. She's into theater. So, if that's on my list and there's some huge conference we're planning for work, I'm going to make sure that I can still do this trip with my daughter and there's not going to be a conflict with travel or with work, or I'll put that in my calendar first. So that's the first priority. So you're always evaluating it. And I will say, as you mature and grow in this you'll find your list grows or shrinks. But I think ask yourself, do I have enough self-awareness to even go through this process and discipline? And if the answer is no, go hire a coach and find someone that can guide you through it. Because there's 20 different versions of what we're talking about out there. Yeah. Second is, do you have the time scheduled to do it?
Yeah.
I think that's it.
That's what I was just going to say. Like, it sounds so easy, but you just reinforcing the calendar, put it on the calendar, put the New York trip on the calendar, put date nights on the calendar, put driving to school on the calendar, put, like the things you want to do, even from your planning sessions to the little family dinners if you put that stuff on there, then work fills in around it.
And people feel like it's like impersonal to be like, hey, honey, I'm putting date night in the calendar. I'm scheduling Friday night dinner with our family. But the reality is we will not do it. Like the truth is we won't do it unless we do that. So like, don't worry about it. It might be weird. Your significant other or your kids might be like, why are you doing that? But look, we do it in work. If we want to have a meeting, we schedule it and it happens. So why would we treat our personal life any differently?
100%. So if you get one takeaway from this, it's to put all your personal stuff on the calendar. All right. So we talked about the goal planning, quarterly, annual planning. We talked about the daily occurrences, making things just a priority. So you've really been able to put that to work to build a huge business. But like you said at the beginning, it took working on you first. Mm-hmm. Like old Russ Perry could not have built Design Pickle. I know that. Right? And so I think people see what you've created and they wonder how to copy the business principles. But I think what they miss is how much work you've put in on the personal side. And I've gotten a lot from you, inspiration from you. You forced me to run around a mountain a bunch of times when I was first getting into the fitness thing. So thank you for that. Is there any other little tips or hacks or things you'd recommend for people trying to take the reins in this area?
Well, I think it's the advice, but also, the concept that the same applies for your teams. And it's important to lead and live a life of example for personal growth, but know that your teams are watching. And while obviously with, HR rules and things, there's a certain limitation of what's appropriate, and you can't force your team to, hey, let's talk about your marriage or something like that. But I do believe that part of our success has been that I have given opportunities for my team members, even at a small level to a large level, to also invest in their own personal growth. And that's created a really tight network because there's, pardon me, it's real life here. That's something that has allowed them to know that, hey, the same concepts applies. Like, it's not just about show up every day and work. We want to make sure you have the skill sets and the knowledge to manage what else is going on out there. And so we have extra benefits that support that. We have reimbursements that support that. And that goes for our global team. So that's like the other thing is don't hold this just for yourself. How can you enable this to be something that's part of your company culture? And ultimately, it will create a really trusting culture. And what we've seen is a pretty high performing culture because people are happier, which in turn leads to just a better environment.
Yeah. So if you're listening to this and not happy where you work, come work for Design Pickle or Trainual. We will invest in you. But Russ, you've put out so much content on this too. So if people want to dig deeper into this, where should they go?
So it's a bit of a weird library. You'll see a lot of different phases of my life, but the best place for this kind of content is just on my personal website, which is russperry.co. I also have a nice little handy daily time planner that I use. It's a printable where I actually get into the nuances of time blocking and time planning, which is a whole other podcast episode we could do, which I'm really a big nerd about it. But you can go through the blog. There's podcasts. There's lots of content. I'm not currently publishing stuff there, but it's a huge library of a lot of stuff I've done over the years with tons of content on this topic.
Awesome. So check that out. And for Design Pickle, where do they find that?
Man, go to designpickle.com. I mean, again, flat rate creative services. And it's, I'm not just saying this. I mean, obviously I love my company, but what you'll feel is people who care. And that's like a huge part about what we do inside of that. So if you need help creating, need help pivoting, need help building a vision board for your new life, designing it, we'd love to help.
Awesome. All right, Russ. Well, thank you. Obviously, love hanging out with you. Thanks for spending some time here. For anybody else that's listening that follows me online on Instagram or YouTube or LinkedIn, you'll see Russ pop up in my stories all the time. I'm always with him or tagging him in something. So it's been really fun to build a business alongside his. But Russ, thanks again for being here.
Dude, thanks, Garen. I'm so lucky I finally got invited to come after all these episodes.
Hey, thanks for listening to Organized Chaos. If you like this episode, be sure to subscribe and leave a review or share it with anyone in your network that you think could use this information. If you want to connect with me personally, please text me 480-531-8411 or connect with me anywhere on social at Chris Ronzio. Or you can connect with Trainual at Trainual, just like a training manual. See you next time.